In the shadowed pages of American criminal history, the Zodiac Killer occupies a singular space. He wasn't just a murderer. He was a correspondent, a self-proclaimed genius, and a puzzle maker who challenged the authorities, the media, and the public with codes, symbols, and a brutal indifference to human life. Operating in Northern California during the late 1960s and early 1970s, the Zodiacs confirmed victims number at least 5, but he claimed responsibility for many more. His taunting letters, some laced with cryptic ciphers, remain among the most infamous communications ever sent to law enforcement and the press. But while his crimes left a trail of pain and fear, it was the mystery he crafted around himself that truly captured the public's imagination. The Zodiac wanted to be studied, decoded, and remembered. For decades, professional cryptographers and hobbyists alike have tried to break his unsolved ciphers. Some succeeded, others remain puzzles, resistant even to the most advanced tools of the 21st century. This video isn't a retelling of every aspect of the Zodiac's crimes. It's a focused journey through the language he left behind, the ciphers, the codes, the subtle linguistic hints that may bring us closer to understanding the mind behind the mask. In recent years, breakthroughs in computational cryptography, machine learning, and collaborative digital forensics have cracked previously unbreakable puzzles. They've opened doors, but behind each door lies a hallway of new questions. Today, we'll walk through those corridors together. From the first taunting cipher cracked in a California living room to the decades-later decryption of the notorious 340-character code, to the advanced software tools now peeling back the layers of remaining unsolved texts. This isn't about sensationalism. It's about facts, verified insights, and the power of persistence. We'll explore the known, examine the breakthroughs, and stay grounded in the evidence. The Zodiac Killer remains unknown, but perhaps for the first time in decades, we're closer to knowing him than ever before. On the night of December 20th, 1968, in the quiet town of Vallejo, California, 2 teenagers, David Faraday and Betty Lou Jensen, were parked in a remote lover's lane spot off Lake Herman Road. Before the night was over, both were dead. David shot once in the head at close range. Betty Lou gunned down as she fled the car. No witnesses, no known suspects, just 2 lives extinguished without a clear motive. It might have ended there as an isolated and tragic double homicide. But less than 7 months later, another couple was attacked in similar fashion. This time, on the night of July 4th, 1969, Darlene Farr and Michael Mageau were sitting in a parked car at Blue Rock Springs Park, also in Vallejo. A man approached, fired multiple rounds, and left. Darlene died. Michael survived. Barely. Then the phone call came. A man claiming responsibility for both crimes phoned the Vallejo Police Department from a gas station payphone. He spoke with calm detachment, offering specific details only the killer could know. This was no random spree. This was someone who wanted to be heard. A month later, the killer mailed his first letters, 3 in total, sent to the San Francisco Chronicle, the San Francisco Examiner, and the Vallejo Times-Herald. Each letter contained 1/3 of a cipher, a 408-character encrypted message composed of cryptic symbols. The killer demanded publication of his message or he'd strike again. He signed off not with a name, but with a peculiar symbol, a circle with a cross through it, what we now recognize as the Zodiac signature. The letters were published, and the cryptograms ignited a frenzy. Readers across the country attempted to crack the code. Teachers, students, veterans, and hobbyists scanned the symbols for patterns. 2 weeks later, a high school teacher named Donald Hardin and his wife Betty solved the puzzle. The decoded message didn't reveal the killer's name, as he'd hinted it would, but instead delivered a chilling message of thrill-seeking and contempt for human life. Over the following months, the Zodiac sent more letters. He taunted police. He described his crimes in detail. He ridiculed investigators and threatened schoolchildren. His next known attack took place on September 27, 1969, at Lake Berryessa, where he stabbed Brian Hartnell and Cecilia Shepard. Hartnell survived. Shepard did not. 2 weeks later, In San Francisco's upscale Presidio Heights neighborhood, the Zodiac shot and killed taxi driver Paul Stein. This time he was seen. Several witnesses described a man leaving the scene, yet he evaded capture. Days later, the Zodiac mailed a bloody piece of Stein's shirt to the San Francisco Chronicle to prove he was the killer. By now, his crimes had spanned rural, suburban, and urban settings. His victims included couples and strangers. His weapons ranged from guns to knives. And always, the letters continued, each bearing his distinct symbol and often accompanied by cryptograms meant to taunt, confuse, and challenge. The Zodiac wasn't just murdering people. He was orchestrating a performance, and the ciphers were his curtain calls. When the Zodiac Killer first contacted the press in August 1969, he made clear that his campaign was not just about violence. It was about communication. Embedded in his chilling letters were messages crafted with strange symbols, circles, triangles, backward letters, odd hieroglyphs. These weren't idle doodles. They were ciphers, codes to be solved. And with them, he issued a challenge to the public and to law enforcement. Decode my message, and you'll know who I am. The first cipher, now known as the Z408, arrived divided across 3 letters, each sent to a different Bay Area newspaper. Zodiac wrote that he wanted these letters printed on the front page, or he would kill again. He claimed the cipher contained his identity and warned of more murders if his demands weren't met. The newspapers complied. On August 2nd, 1969, the San Francisco Chronicle and other local papers published a 3-part cipher alongside excerpts from the Zodiac's letters. The public response was immediate. Amateur cryptographers, puzzle enthusiasts, and linguists began attempting to crack the puzzle. The FBI also got involved, but the breakthrough came not from a government agency, but from a schoolteacher and his wife. Donald and Betty Hardin of Salinas, California, approached the cipher with logic and intuition. They hypothesized that the killer would begin his message with a statement like, "I like killing," or "I am the Zodiac," and they guessed that frequently occurring symbols might represent commonly used letters like E and T. Using this method, they deciphered the message in just a few days. The decoded text was revealing, though not in the way many had hoped. The message read, "I like killing people because it is so much fun. It is more fun than killing wild game in the forest because man is the most dangerous animal of all to kill." The letter continued in the same vein, describing murder as a thrilling game. It ended with a warning that the killer would be reborn in paradise, and that all those he had killed would become his slaves. What it didn't reveal, despite his claim, was his name. This omission was frustrating, but also strategic. The Zodiac had created a puzzle just solvable enough to entice attention and cause alarm, yet vague enough to protect his identity. It was a psychological play as much as a cryptographic one. And with the 408 cipher cracked, Zodiac escalated his campaign. In November 1969, a new letter arrived. It included a second, more complex cipher, 340 characters arranged in a rectangular block. Unlike the previous cipher, this one defied all initial attempts at decryption. Known as the Z340, it used an irregular symbol set, inconsistent spacing, and an arrangement that lacked the linear predictability of the earlier code. The 340 cipher became an obsession. The FBI, CIA, NSA, military cryptographers, and amateur sleuths across the world took a stab at it. Books and articles were written about it. Some claimed to have partial solutions, while others believed the cipher was deliberately unsolvable. The Zodiac himself hinted at the latter possibility in follow-up letters, writing in December 1969, Des July, August, September, October = 7, suggesting there was a message hidden within the months, or perhaps a misdirection entirely. Yet, for all the attention it received, the 340 cipher remained unbroken for more than 50 years. The Zodiac's use of cryptograms wasn't limited to these 2 major examples. In April 1970, he sent a postcard to the Chronicle with a 13-character cipher. In June, he followed with a letter containing a map and a 32-symbol cipher, implying that it led to a buried bomb. an explosive device he claimed was set to go off at a specific time and place. No bomb was ever found. These smaller ciphers were even more difficult to solve due to their brevity. Cryptographers often note that short codes offer too few symbols to establish reliable patterns, making them nearly impossible to break without additional context. Still, many tried. The idea that one of these short messages might contain the killer's real name continued to lure codebreakers. Throughout 1970 and in 1971, the Zodiac's letters became more erratic. Some featured new symbols or references to cultural events. He claimed to have killed dozens more people, though these claims were unverified. His taunts toward police and the media grew more theatrical. But the codes remained central to his identity. They were his proof of intellect, his way of asserting dominance over those hunting him. In the decades that followed, theories about the ciphers multiplied. Some believed they were simple substitution codes. Others thought they incorporated homophonic substitutions, where multiple symbols represent the same letter. A few theorists even suggested Zodiac borrowed methods from ancient ciphers, including techniques used in wartime encryption. Yet none of these approaches cracked the elusive 340 or the shorter ciphers. The Zodiac's cryptograms didn't just protect his identity, they helped build his legend. While his crimes were horrifying, it was the mystery, the challenge, the air of calculated enigma that kept him at the center of public intrigue for generations. The Zodiac Killer's first cipher, the so-called Z408, offered both a threat and a promise. In his letters to the three newspapers on July 31st, 1969, he stated that the cipher would reveal his identity. He insisted it be printed on the front page, warning that failure to comply would result in more deaths. The message was loud, clear, and terrifying. What arrived in newsrooms across San Francisco were 3 sheets of code, rows of 17 by 24 characters filled with cryptic symbols. These included traditional letters, backward letters, circles, triangles, and other hand-drawn shapes. While the killer's handwriting was neat, the cipher itself was anything but straightforward. Each newspaper received 1/3 of the full cipher. The Zodiac challenged the public to solve it, hinting that those who succeeded might learn his name. For law enforcement, it was both a clue and a taunt. For the public, it was an invitation to participate in a real-life murder mystery. Donald and Betty Hardin, a schoolteacher couple from Salinas, took the challenge personally. They had no formal training in cryptography. What they did have was patience, logic, and an understanding of how people write. They began by guessing that the message might begin with a boast. A likely phrase, they reasoned, was, "I like killing people," based on the Zodiac's tone and earlier statements. From that point, they applied frequency analysis, a method used to identify the most common letters in English, like E, T, and look for patterns. Betty speculated that repeating symbols likely represented repeating letters or common digraphs like LL or TISH. With these insights, they built a key, slowly replacing symbols with letters until words began to form. After days of work, the full message came into focus. The cipher read, "I like killing people because it is so much fun. It is more fun than killing wild game in the forest because man is the most dangerous animal of all." The passage went on, describing murder as a game, claiming that those the killer had slain would become his slaves in the afterlife. The tone was cold and devoid of remorse, disturbingly detached. But perhaps most unsettling of all was the final line, "I will not give you my name because you will try to slow down or stop my collecting of slaves for my afterlife." Despite his earlier claim, the Zodiac had never intended to reveal his name. The cipher was a decoy. It provided no identity, only a glimpse into a disturbed psyche. Still, the Hardin's breakthrough was celebrated. The FBI confirmed the accuracy of the decryption and praised the couple's ingenuity. But for investigators, the message's content brought limited practical value. It confirmed what was already suspected. The Zodiac was a narcissistic, methodical individual who viewed human life as a game piece in a private, twisted fantasy. The successful cracking of the 408 cipher showed that the Zodiac could be deciphered, but only when he allowed it. He had used a relatively simple substitution method, with some deliberate irregularities to mislead solvers. Yet he left just enough structure for an attentive mind to work through. It was a victory, but a narrow one. Encouraged by the attention, the Zodiac would soon escalate, sending a second cipher that would remain unsolved for more than 50 years. On November 8, 1969, the Zodiac Killer struck again. Not with a weapon, but with another cipher. This time, the envelope sent to the San Francisco Chronicle included a greeting card with disturbing language and an encrypted message that would become one of the most elusive puzzles in American criminal history. The 340-character cipher, often referred to as Z340. Compared to the earlier 408-character cipher, this new code appeared far more complex. It was arranged in a 20 by 17 grid, composed of seemingly random symbols, shapes, and letters. The tone of the accompanying letter was mocking. Zodiac referenced recent media coverage and hinted that he would continue to kill until captured. And once again, he signed off with his now infamous crosshair symbol. At first glance, the 340 cipher resembled the earlier one. Investigators and amateur sleuths expected it to follow a similar pattern, perhaps a homophonic substitution, where each letter of the alphabet is represented by more than one symbol. But attempts to crack it using this method failed. Something was different. The FBI's cryptanalysis team, experienced in solving enemy codes during World War II and the Cold War, made multiple attempts. Private cryptographers, university professors, and puzzle experts joined the effort. But the cipher resisted all traditional approaches. Symbols were repeated in odd ways. Letter frequencies didn't match normal English patterns. The structure seemed inconsistent or deliberately misleading. Some believed the cipher was a hoax, an intentionally unsolvable jumble of characters meant to waste time. Others insisted the solution was simply beyond the tools of the era. As the years wore on and the Zodiac's crimes ceased, the cipher faded from headlines, but never left the minds of those obsessed with solving it. There were dozens of false claims of a breakthrough. Some claimed the message revealed Zodiac's name. Others produced translations that lacked coherence or failed to account for every symbol. None held up under scrutiny. To many, the cipher represented the final wall between the Zodiac's cryptic world and public understanding. The cipher's mystique only grew. It came to symbolize the Zodiac himself, methodical, elusive, clever, and defiant. It was not just a code. It was a provocation, an intellectual duel played out across decades. Part of what made the 340 cipher so confounding was its apparent lack of a discernible system. In the 408 cipher, each symbol represented a single letter. Once the substitution pattern was identified, the message unfolded. But in the 340, Zodiac appeared to layer additional complexity into the code. Analysts noted that the symbols seemed to form diagonal and vertical patterns, not just linear rows. Some characters were grouped into mirrored pairs, while others broke standard alignment. Attempts to apply known ciphers, Caesar shifts, frequency matching, Vigenère keys, produced nothing. Others tried to overlay maps, rotate the grid, or rearrange the characters entirely. Still, none of these efforts worked. And for decades, the cipher remained stubbornly silent. In the early 2000s, as home computing power grew and online communities formed around cold cases, interest in Z340 saw a resurgence. Forums, cryptographic software, and collaborative efforts revived the cipher. Thousands of enthusiasts fed the 340 into algorithms, created digital replicas, and built custom solvers. Despite these efforts, the cipher remained locked. Several patterns hinted at underlying logic. Analysts noticed that Zodiac may have employed a technique called transposition, where letters are rearranged according to a hidden system. This could explain the lack of readable segments in a standard left-to-right approach. Others theorized that the cipher might have been broken into multiple layers, a substitution layer and a positional rearrangement. The cipher's endurance raised deeper questions. Was the Zodiac truly a skilled cryptographer? Or had he stumbled upon complexity by accident? Was the cipher meant to be solved at all? Then, in 2019, an international team consisting of American software developer David Ornschak, Belgian mathematician Jarl van Eyck, and Australian applied mathematician Sam Blake took a new approach. Using custom-built code-breaking tools and thousands of possible variations, they simulated different reading directions and transposition methods. Their work was built not just on cryptographic knowledge, but on brute force computational power and persistent testing. By December 2020, they had a result that passed every test of plausibility. The decrypted message read, "I hope you are having lots of fun in trying to catch me. That wasn't me on the TV show. I am not afraid of the gas chamber, because it will send me to paradise all the sooner." The message offered no name, no location, no new victims, but it matched Zodiac's known tone, vocabulary, and ideology. It referenced a specific media event, an appearance by someone claiming to be the Zodiac on a televised talk show, which aligned with the letter's postmark date. The FBI confirmed the solution, stating it matched what they had expected based on prior Zodiac communications. Crucially, the code used a diagonal transposition scheme, meaning the message wasn't simply read left to right. Instead, characters were shifted diagonally across the grid in a repeating pattern, combined with repeated symbols and subtle substitutions. This made the cipher uniquely difficult to crack using traditional methods. The solution didn't bring us closer to Zodiac's identity, but it shattered the myth that the cipher was unbreakable. It also raised hope that other unsolved Zodiac messages might finally yield their secrets. For over 50 years, the 340-character cipher had loomed as a monument to the unknown. Now, it stood as a testament to human persistence and the idea that even the most cryptic messages can, one day, be read. On December 3rd, 2020, a quiet but seismic event occurred in the true crime world. An email arrived in the inbox of David Ornschak, a software developer and Zodiac cipher researcher. It came from Jarl van Eyck, a Belgian programmer who had been working with Ornschak, and an Australian mathematician named Sam Blake. In the message was a proposed solution to the Zodiac's infamous 340-character cipher. After decades of attempts and countless false starts, something had finally clicked. The team had spent over a year building a customized cipher-solving tool. Ornschak, who had been analyzing Zodiac ciphers since 2006, had long suspected that the Zodiac used a kind of transpositional cipher, a system in which the order of characters is deliberately scrambled in a grid or along a diagonal, rather than following a straight line. This type of encryption had not been thoroughly tested in previous decades due to its complexity and a sheer number of possible arrangements. They named their approach diagonal transposition. Using powerful computer programs developed by Van Eyck, they simulated hundreds of thousands of permutations of the cipher grid. Each variation changed the reading direction, grid width, and symbol interpretation. Sam Blake contributed the statistical modeling to assess whether the outputs resembled coherent English. The process wasn't just brute force computing. It was directed problem-solving guided by linguistic analysis, cryptographic theory, and context from Zodiac's known writing style. Then came the breakthrough. One configuration produced readable English, and it contained unmistakable hallmarks of Zodiac's voice. The message read, "I hope you are having lots of fun in trying to catch me. That wasn't me on the TV show," which brings up a point about me. I am not afraid of the gas chamber because it will send me to paradise all the sooner because I now have enough slaves to work for me. The decoded message fit a specific historical moment. In October 1969, a man claiming to be the Zodiac called into a San Francisco television program hosted by Jim Dunbar. During the call, he spoke with psychiatrist Dr. Melvin Bailey. Zodiac later referenced this event in a separate letter. The message in the 340 cipher now confirmed that the real killer was watching and wanted to distance himself from the imposter on air. Equally striking was the line about the gas chamber. During this era, California was actively debating capital punishment. Zodiac, ever conscious of public narratives, inserted himself into the discussion. The phrase about slaves in the afterlife echoed a nearly identical statement from the earlier 408-character cipher, reinforcing the idea that this message came from the same individual. What astonished investigators was how long it had taken to find the solution and why. The cipher didn't follow a typical substitution format. Instead, Zodiac constructed it using a two-stage process. First, assigning symbols to letters, a monoalphabetic substitution, and second, rearranging those characters using a diagonal reading pattern across a 19-column grid. This created visual chaos that rendered the message unreadable unless reconstructed exactly. The complexity wasn't random. Zodiac had deliberately designed the cipher to confound standard techniques. He introduced repeated symbols, misaligned rows, and intentional visual patterns that disrupted rhythm. While not a trained cryptographer, he demonstrated an intuitive grasp of how to foil pattern recognition, possibly influenced by manuals or amateur puzzle books of the time. The response to the breakthrough was cautious but optimistic. The FBI's San Francisco office issued a statement confirming that the code had been cracked and that the message was consistent with Zodiac's known writings. However, they emphasized that the case remained open and unsolved. The identity of the killer, which many had hoped would be revealed in this cipher, remained absent. David Orenchak later described the moment as bittersweet. He had dedicated 14 years to studying the Zodiac ciphers and had finally helped unlock one of the most perplexing codes in criminal history. But there was no confession, no signature, just more of the same detached bravado. Still, the implications were significant. First, it proved that the Zodiac ciphers were not gibberish. For decades, some theorists had argued that the 340 was intentionally meaningless, an elaborate hoax. That belief had discouraged new analysis. The 2020 decryption changed that perception permanently. Second, the solution opened new possibilities for the remaining unsolved ciphers. The shorter 13-character and 32-character messages might use similar methods or contain embedded transpositions. The success also inspired renewed efforts in linguistic and computational forensics. What had once been considered unsolvable was now demonstrably solvable, with enough time, creativity, and processing power. Moreover, the breakthrough demonstrated the power of distributed problem-solving. Orenchak was a civilian. Blake and Van Eyck were not law enforcement. Yet through collaboration, technological skill, and an obsessive attention to detail, they achieved what trained investigators had not. It was a quiet reminder that progress in cold cases often comes not from institutional muscle, but from persistence outside traditional frameworks. The team submitted their findings for peer review, including detailed analysis of the methods used. Their transparency was critical. Unlike earlier claims of solutions that couldn't be replicated, this one stood up to scrutiny. Others were able to follow the process and reach the same decoded text. In the wake of the cipher solution, interest in the Zodiac case surged. Documentaries were updated. Cryptography communities reignited. And investigators returned to the Zodiac's other letters, scanning them for clues that may have been overlooked, especially those written close in time to the 340 cipher. While the mystery of Zodiac's identity remains intact, the resolution of the 340 proves something more enduring, that no puzzle is beyond solving. Time may erode memory, and evidence may grow cold, but human curiosity is relentless. In the case of the Zodiac, it may one day be the deciding force. While the decryption of the 340-character cipher marked a significant breakthrough, several Zodiac ciphers remain unsolved. These shorter codes, particularly the 13-character and 32-character ciphers, continue to resist analysis. And unlike the 340, their brevity poses a different kind of challenge, one not of complexity, but of ambiguity. The first of these is known as the Z13, sent on April 20th, 1970. This message was brief, just 13 characters arranged in a single row, accompanied by a letter containing another of Zodiac's grandiose statements. The cipher itself reads, N plus 8M plus and AM equals the symbols are not immediately decipherable. There is no clear pattern. The inclusion of mathematical symbols, plus signs, and an equals sign adds another layer of confusion. It's unclear whether these marks are intended literally, symbolically, or simply as misdirection. The letter that accompanied the cipher claimed that the code contained the killer's identity. But after the deception surrounding the 408-character cipher, many were skeptical. It was entirely possible that Zodiac was once again toying with the idea of revelation, without actually giving anything away. Efforts to decode Z13 have continued for decades, but its short length limits what can be done analytically. In cryptographic terms, a cipher this brief doesn't provide enough data to generate statistically significant patterns. Without a known encryption method or additional context, every interpretation risks being speculative. Multiple solutions have been proposed, but none have been verified and none are widely accepted. 2 months after sending Z13, Zodiac followed up with a letter postmarked June 26, 1970. This time, he included a map of the San Francisco Bay Area and a new cipher, this one containing 32 characters. Known as Z32, it was reportedly meant to reveal the location of a hidden bomb set to detonate at a future date. Zodiac wrote that the solution to the cipher would identify the bomb's coordinates. The code was accompanied by a crosshair, symbol superimposed over a map, centered around Mount Diablo. Zodiac provided a cryptic note. The map coupled with this code will tell you where the bomb is set. You have until next fall to dig it up. But no bomb was ever found, and the cipher has never been definitively solved. Z32's structure mirrors the previous puzzles in tone and symbolism, but its meaning remains opaque. Some theorists believe the cipher requires geographic triangulation using compass degrees or landmark positions. Others have proposed complex mathematical decoding methods. Still, the lack of verifiable outcomes keeps these theories in the realm of speculation. In a broader sense, these unsolved ciphers have become more than puzzles. They are artifacts of Zodiac's manipulation. His ability to craft codes that imply great meaning, yet yield little, allowed him to maintain control over the narrative. Each cipher represented a promise, a name, a location, a future event, but none delivered conclusively. This ambiguity, whether by design or accident, continues to frustrate and fascinate. If the ciphers contain real information, then solving them might still provide critical insights. If they are mere diversions, they reinforce Zodiac's cruel sense of humor and his disdain for those try to stop him. Modern cryptographers often point out that solving Z13 or Z32 may be impossible without additional keys, such as a crib, a known phrase from which decoding can begin, or a one-time pad, a unique encryption key known only to the sender. In the absence of such elements, any interpretation risks being a projection rather than a solution. Still, technology continues to evolve. Just as machine learning tools help crack Z340, new algorithms might one day tackle the remaining ciphers in more sophisticated ways. Each letter, each symbol, remains part of an unfinished equation, one that people around the world still try to solve. As the Zodiac ciphers endured across decades, the tools used to analyze them evolved. What began with pencil and paper logic puzzles in the late 1960s gradually transformed into a digital discipline. Cryptanalysis moved into the realm of artificial intelligence, pattern recognition, and machine learning. These modern technologies have created new hope for decoding not only the remaining Zodiac ciphers, but also gaining insight into the mind that crafted them. One of the most significant changes in recent years is the accessibility of powerful computing. Where early investigators relied on human intuition and trial and error substitution, modern cryptographers use algorithms that can simulate millions of cipher permutations in seconds. This computational brute force, when paired with intelligent heuristics, has made it possible to test more hypotheses faster and more accurately than ever before. Take the cracking of the 340 cipher as an example. The solution depended not only on algorithmic testing, but on simulating different grid dimensions, reading directions, and symbol transpositions. Tasks far too complex to be executed manually with any efficiency. The team that cracked the cipher relied on software developed specifically for the Zodiac case, using advanced scanning of possible decryptions and measuring outputs against expected English word patterns. This success underscored a truth long suspected. Zodiac's ciphers weren't necessarily undecipherable, just incompatible with the limitations of his era's tools. Today's software doesn't just process symbols. It understands them in context. Linguistic pattern recognition allows programs to identify not only individual words, but also stylistic tendencies, grammar choices, punctuation quirks, and even psychological tone. This opens the door to a new kind of Zodiac research, one that doesn't just decode messages but interprets them. Machine learning can also be applied in stylometry, the analysis of writing style to determine authorship. By training AI on verified Zodiac letters, researchers can compare them with writings from potential suspects. Although stylometry alone cannot confirm identity in a court of law, it can highlight patterns of interest, potentially narrowing the field of suspects or strengthening circumstantial links. Another area of exploration involves predictive modeling. Cryptographers now use algorithms to simulate possible Zodiac message structures based on what's already known. For example, if the Zodiac used a specific pattern in the 340 cipher, it's plausible he reused elements of that design in Z13 or Z32. By analyzing known ciphers, machines can learn the killer's preferences, such as symbol duplication, sentence structure, or diagonal transposition tendencies, and apply those patterns to unsolved texts. AI tools can also aid in the search for hidden patterns across Zodiac's full set of communications. Some researchers have fed the killer's letters into natural language processing engines to detect shifts in tone, vocabulary, and structure over time. This kind of temporal stylometry can suggest whether certain letters, some of which are disputed in authorship, were written by the same person. While inconclusive on their own, these insights help build a clearer picture of consistency across Zodiac's body of work. Digital forensics, too, has entered the conversation. Though the ciphers themselves are mostly scanned images today, their physical originals still exist in evidence lockers. Advances in forensic imaging could detect microscopic details in the handwriting, pressure patterns, ink types, or even sequence of strokes that might further validate or exclude specific authorship theories. But the biggest strength of modern tools is not their processing speed. It's their capacity to collaborate. Across the internet, decentralized communities of cryptography enthusiasts work in tandem, sharing theories, software, and partial decryptions. Platforms like Reddit, GitHub, and Cipher Mysteries have become informal laboratories for collective problem solving. Tools that were once restricted to government agencies are now available as open source packages. And contributions come from all corners: programmers, linguists, historians, even puzzle hobbyists. This collaborative environment encourages transparency. When someone proposes a solution, others can independently test it using shared software and datasets. This has helped the field mature, reducing the number of false claims and shifting the culture toward peer-reviewed breakthroughs. Still, modern tools are not magic keys. Despite their power, the remaining Zodiac ciphers have yet to yield their secrets. Algorithms can test millions of variations, but they require initial assumptions like grid size, symbol-to-letter mappings, or expected English syntax. If those assumptions are wrong, the outputs remain noise. Moreover, Zodiac may have deliberately introduced red herrings. Some symbols may be purely decorative. Some codes may be meaningless by design, exploiting the human tendency to find patterns even where none exist. This uncertainty is part of what makes solving these ciphers so difficult. Yet progress is undeniable. The 340 cipher was solved. Stylometric models now analyze Zodiac's linguistic fingerprints. Software is being used to simulate message structures never previously considered. And all of this is done faster and more efficiently than ever before. Technology alone may not solve the Zodiac mystery, but paired with human insight, it offers the best chance yet of cracking the ciphers that remain. In the digital age, the Zodiac's greatest weapon, his ciphers, may yet become his undoing. While cryptographic tools help decode what the Zodiac wrote, linguistic forensics seeks to understand how and why he wrote it. Every sentence carries more than meaning. It carries style. Grammar, syntax, vocabulary, and punctuation all form patterns unique to individuals. In recent years, investigators have turned to stylometry, a branch of computational linguistics, to analyze Zodiac's known letters for authorship clues. Stylometry has long been used in literary studies to attribute anonymous works to writers based on word frequency and structural tendencies. Now, the same methods are applied to cold cases. With Zodiac, the question is twofold. Do the known letters reflect a consistent voice? And do any suspect writings outside the case resemble that voice? The Zodiac's letters, confirmed and disputed, share certain stylistic traits. He often avoids contractions, using I am instead of I'm. He uses simple, declarative sentences and frequently omits punctuation at the end of phrases. When he does punctuate, he leans toward colons and exclamation marks. His spelling is inconsistent but deliberate, sometimes incorrect in ways that seem performative, not accidental. These quirks form a fingerprint of sorts. By running the text through stylometric software, analysts can compare the Zodiac's writing to that of known individuals. The software doesn't search for exact matches. Instead, it identifies statistical similarities across dozens of stylistic dimensions, such as average sentence length, lexical richness, and preferred grammatical structures. One such approach involves n-gram analysis, examining patterns of adjacent letters or words. For example, how often does the Zodiac use the because or I like? Are these frequencies unusual? If a known suspect's letters display a matching pattern, that could suggest a stylistic link. Though not definitive evidence, it adds another data point to the broader investigation. Researchers have tested several public suspects using these methods, comparing their known writings with Zodiac's confirmed letters. Results have been inconclusive, but intriguing. In some cases, stylistic overlaps emerged. In others, significant differences suggested unlikelihood. Importantly, stylometry is probabilistic, not deterministic. A high match rate might imply a connection, but it's not proof. Linguistic analysis has also helped in vetting disputed Zodiac letters. Several communications sent after 1974 are debated in terms of authorship. Using stylometric models trained on confirmed Zodiac texts, analysts can measure the likelihood that later letters were written by the same person. The findings are mixed. Some disputed letters align closely with the established profile. Others deviate in structure and tone, raising doubts about their authenticity. Tone is another analytical factor. Zodiac's early letters are cold and calculated, written with deliberate detachment. Later ones take on a mocking, even playful tone, with sarcastic references to the media and pop culture. Stylometric tools can track these tonal shifts and determine whether they fall within a plausible range for the same author or suggest a change in voice. Beyond stylistics, forensic linguists also examine pragmatics, the social function of language. For example, Zodiac repeatedly frames his actions as games and his victims as slaves, suggesting a consistent worldview. His use of imperative statements, print this cipher, you will try to slow me down, also reflects a desire for control. These patterns, while not unique, help paint a psychological portrait consistent across his communications. Despite these insights, there are limitations. The Zodiac's writing is performative. He was writing to an audience, often with the goal of manipulation or intimidation. This performative layer can mask his authentic voice, making stylometric analysis less reliable. Additionally, the sample size is small, only a few thousand words across all confirmed letters, which restricts the statistical power of many models. Still, linguistic analysis remains a valuable tool. It doesn't deliver conclusions, but it refines the margins of inquiry. It can rule out clear mismatches. It can highlight texts that deserve more scrutiny. And it can identify overlooked consistencies in the killer's messaging. The Zodiac was more than a killer. He was a communicator. His ciphers challenged logic, but his letters revealed intention. And while stylometry may not unmask him, it brings us closer to the voice behind the veil. While official investigations into the Zodiac case continue under law enforcement, a parallel effort has long been underway online. Over the years, a vast and persistent network of digital sleuths has emerged. Amateur detectives, cryptographers, linguists, and true crime enthusiasts, working independently and collaboratively to solve the enduring mystery. These communities gather in forums, subreddits, and dedicated websites, sharing theories, analyzing letters, and developing code-breaking software. Some approach the case methodically, relying on established cryptographic principles and forensic data. Others pursue more speculative paths, drawing connections from patterns, coincidences, or obscure cultural references. The spectrum of engagement is wide, but the common thread is obsession. One of the most prominent voices in this landscape is David Oranchak, the software developer who helped crack the 340-character cipher. Long before the 2020 breakthrough, Oranchak had maintained a website, Zodiac Killer ciphers.com, where he published detailed cipher breakdowns and hosted community input. His work exemplifies the best of the online effort: rigorous, transparent, and collaborative. Reddits r/Zodiac and similar platforms host ongoing discussions about everything from cipher structure to suspect handwriting. Posts often include side-by-side image comparisons, decrypted cipher trials, and debates over linguistic nuances. Some users focus on geographic profiling. Others delve into timelines, newspaper archives, or forensic artifacts. These platforms have become digital laboratories, places where anyone with interest and discipline can contribute. Open source software has also played a key role. Tools like A's Decrypt, designed by co-cracker Jarl van Eyck, are now publicly available and used by hobbyists worldwide. These programs allow users to test cipher hypotheses without advanced programming knowledge. The democratization of cipher analysis has broadened participation beyond academic or professional circles. However, the rise of digital sleuthing brings challenges. Not all contributions are grounded in evidence. Some threads spiral into speculation, linking the Zodiac to unrelated crimes, historical figures, or even fictional templates. The temptation to connect dots, even when they're unconnected, is strong in a case that thrives on ambiguity. False leads, once posted, often circulate for years. There's also the ethical concern of suspect identification. Some online investigators publicly name individuals based on circumstantial or stylometric evidence. While these efforts may be sincere, they can cause real harm, especially when those named are deceased or have surviving family members. Responsible forums have implemented guidelines discouraging unverified accusations, but moderation is imperfect. Despite these issues, the online community has contributed meaningfully to Zodiac research. Beyond the 340 cipher, these digital investigators have reconstructed timelines, digitized letter archives, and even corrected historical errors in public records. In many ways, they function as an informal think tank, constantly testing, refining, and expanding the scope of inquiry. The story of a Zodiac is no longer just a case file locked in a police archive. It lives across thousands of tabs, message boards, and data sets. It's been translated into programming languages, indexed in search engines, and plotted on interactive maps. The killer's decision to engage the public through letters and ciphers created a puzzle that people now feel invited to solve. And they are still trying. More than 5 decades after the Zodiac Killer first claimed his victims, the case remains officially open. Despite the passing of time, multiple law enforcement agencies, including the San Francisco Police Department, the FBI, and local jurisdictions in Vallejo, Napa, and Riverside, continue to maintain active files. But as witnesses pass away and physical evidence ages, the path to resolution has narrowed. In recent years, however, advances in forensic technology have opened new doors. Chief among these is genetic genealogy, the method that helped identify the Golden State Killer in 2018. This approach uses DNA samples from crime scenes and cross-references them with public genealogy databases to find familial connections. If a viable DNA sample from the Zodiac exists, this method could, in theory, lead to a name. There have been claims that partial Zodiac DNA has been extracted from envelopes and stamps. However, no official confirmation has been given about whether the samples are complete, uncontaminated, or suitable for modern analysis. The San Francisco Police Department stated in 2002 that a partial profile was obtained from a stamp, but efforts to match it to suspects have not produced conclusive results. Meanwhile, cold case units continue to re-examine existing evidence using newer methods: fingerprint enhancement, fiber analysis, and trace chemical detection. Small details overlooked in the original investigations may gain significance under modern scrutiny. Case files, once kept on paper, are now digitized and searchable, allowing for new kinds of cross-referencing between reports, letters, and crime scene data. Still, challenges persist. Jurisdictional fragmentation complicates progress. The Zodiac operated across multiple counties, each with its own records, procedures, and priorities. Over time, the loss of institutional memory, officers retiring, records being misfiled, creates gaps that are hard to bridge. Some leads have gone cold not because they were wrong, but because they were forgotten. The legacy of the Zodiac case also weighs heavily on how it's remembered. The killer's use of media, cryptography, and public manipulation was ahead of its time. He shaped his image deliberately, controlling the narrative in ways that would later become common in serial crime cases. The Zodiac symbol, his tone, and his written style have become cultural shorthand for anonymous menace. And yet, for all the fear he inspired, the Zodiac is ultimately defined by what he left undone. No arrest, no confirmed identity, just questions suspended in time. Some believe the case will never be solved, that the killer died long ago, taking his secrets with him. Others are more hopeful, pointing to the success of long cold cases now solved through digital forensics and DNA. New tools are available that previous generations of investigators could only imagine. If the Zodiac is identified, whether through DNA, a document, or a confession, it will not erase the pain of his victims' families. But it will close a chapter that has lingered far too long. It will bring clarity to a mystery that has defined itself by uncertainty. Until then, the investigation continues, in labs, in archives, and in the minds of those who refuse to forget. The Zodiac case remains, at its core, a confrontation with the unknown. We know the facts, the victims, the timelines, the letters, and the ciphers. We know the fear he spread, the investigators he taunted, and the mystery he crafted so meticulously. But what continues to grip us is everything we don't know. His name, his face, his motive, and perhaps most of all, whether he was ever as in control as he wanted us to believe. The breakthroughs in cryptographic decoding have offered clarity, but also deepened the enigma. The 340 cipher, long thought impenetrable, did speak, eventually. But even in giving us more of Zodiac's voice, it gave us none of his identity. The remaining ciphers, shorter and more ambiguous, tease at meaning but remain unread. Modern tools, machine learning, linguistic analysis, genetic genealogy, are reshaping what's possible in unsolved cases. What once required years of manual effort can now be simulated in hours. What once felt speculative can now be tested with rigor. The digital world has brought the Zodiac into new focus, though the figure at its center remains obscured. His legacy is not in the number of his crimes, but in the depth of his manipulation. He forced law enforcement to adapt, drew the public into a game they didn't ask to play, and designed puzzles not just of letters, but of perception. His ciphers were never just about words. They were about power. In the end, the Zodiac may never be identified, But the work continues, not just in police departments and forensic labs, but in the shared effort of thousands of people who refuse to let the mystery fade into silence. They re-examine every angle, revisit every cipher, and challenge every assumption. Not because the case is solvable, but because it matters that we keep trying. So what do you think of today's video? Do you have something you want us to feature next? Tell us in the comments. It will also mean a lot to us if you like and subscribe. Close the book if you can. This is Black Chapter,